How does a civilization spanning thousands of star systems applaud the end of its own freedom? How does a centuries-old democracy collapse without riots or resistance, while its leaders cheer? The rise of the Galactic Empire wasn't loud. It didn't begin with star destroyers or stormtroopers. It began with fear, paperwork, speeches, and applause, and that's why it worked. This story is fictional and set in the Star Wars universe, but it follows official canon. What makes it unsettling isn't that it's fake. It's how believable it feels. A democracy already cracking. For over 1,000 generations, the Galactic Republic stood as the dominant political system of the galaxy. It was vast, complex, and idealistic, but by the time the story begins, it was already deeply flawed. The Republic had grown too large, too bureaucratic, and too slow to respond to real threats. Corruption flourished quietly. Senators served corporate interests, and endless debate replaced decisive action. To ordinary citizens, the Republic felt distant. Laws were written light years away by people who had never seen their worlds. When problems arose, help arrived late, or not at all. Trust eroded long before the Empire ever existed. This decay mattered because people rarely abandon freedom when it's working. They abandon it when it feels useless. The politician who never looked like a villain. Chief Palpatine did not rise as a tyrant. He rose as a solution. Elected Supreme Chancellor during a time of mounting instability, he presented himself as calm, reasonable, and deeply committed to the Republic. He spoke softly, smiled often, and appeared uncomfortable with power, an act that made people trust him even more. Palpatine never rushed. He understood that power taken too quickly invites resistance. Power given feels legitimate, and so he waited for the galaxy to beg him for control. Behind the scenes, Palpatine was also Darth Sidious, a Sith Lord who had spent decades engineering the Republic's collapse from within. But to the Senate and the public, he was simply the man holding things together. The Clone Wars. The Clone Wars did not merely happen to the Republic. They were designed for it. The conflict erupted between the Republic and the Separatist Alliance, plunging the galaxy into chaos. Entire systems burned, trade routes collapsed, and fear became a daily reality. The Republic, unprepared for large-scale war, suddenly required a massive army. Conveniently, one already existed. The Grand Army of the Republic, composed of cloned soldiers grown on Kamino, appeared almost miraculously at the exact moment it was needed. The origins of this army were suspicious, poorly understood, and barely questioned. In wartime, uncomfortable questions are often postponed indefinitely. The war gave Palpatine the excuse he needed to ask for extraordinary authority, and the Senate, terrified of losing everything, agreed. The legal death of democracy. Emergency powers sound responsible. They imply urgency, necessity, and restraint. In theory, they are temporary. In practice, they are rarely surrendered willingly. The Senate granted Palpatine sweeping emergency powers to oversee the war effort. This allowed him to bypass debate, control military strategy, and centralize authority. Each extension of power was justified as a short-term requirement. Each one weakened the Senate further. The Republic was still alive technically, but it was no longer steering itself. The most dangerous moment for any democracy is not when power is seized, but when it is handed over voluntarily. Heroes turned convenient villains. The Jedi Order had long served as peacekeepers of the Republic, but their role in the Clone Wars changed how they were perceived. Once distant monks, they became military commanders. Once symbols of balance, they became generals directing violence. To the average citizen, the Jedi were mysterious, powerful, and increasingly political. That made them easy targets. Palpatine quietly nurtured suspicion, framing the Jedi as arrogant and unaccountable. When the time came, it would not be difficult to convince the galaxy that these powerful warriors were plotting something dangerous. When fear needs a face, it often chooses the unfamiliar. Order 66. Order 66 was not chaos, it was precision. Hidden within the clone troopers' programming was a contingency command that labeled the Jedi as traitors. When Palpatine issued the order, clone units across the galaxy executed their Jedi commanders without hesitation. To the public, the narrative was clear and horrifying. The Jedi had attempted a coup against the Republic. The Chancellor had survived. The threat had been neutralized. In a single stroke, Palpatine eliminated the only force capable of challenging him while appearing to defend democracy. The Republic had just committed suicide, and thanked him for it. The speech that ended the Republic. Standing before the Galactic Senate, scarred and solemn, Palpatine delivered the speech that ended an era. He did not declare himself emperor out of ambition. He framed it as necessity. He spoke of betrayal, danger, and the need for lasting security. Then he announced that the Republic would be reorganized into the first Galactic Empire. The word reorganized did all the work. It suggested continuity, not collapse. Reform, not domination. The Senate erupted in applause. That applause echoed louder than any blaster fire in galactic history. Why everyone cheered. The Senate did not cheer because it loved tyranny. It cheered because it was exhausted. Years of war had drained the galaxy emotionally and economically. Citizens wanted safety. Senators wanted stability. Corporations wanted predictable markets. Palpatine promised all of it. Most believed they could live with the Empire. Many believed it would never affect them personally. Others told themselves they could influence it from within. History is filled with people who thought cooperation would protect them. The Empire begins quietly. The early Empire did not immediately abolish the Senate. It did not instantly impose brutal rule across every system. That would have sparked resistance. Instead, it governed efficiently. Piracy declined, trade stabilized, order returned. This was intentional. Authoritarian systems rarely begin by being unbearable. They begin by being convenient. Militarization becomes normal life. The galaxy had already adapted to war. Fleets filled the skies. Military checkpoints became routine. Surveillance was justified as protection. The Empire inherited the Republic's entire war machine and repurposed it. Clone armor became stormtrooper armor. Republic symbols were replaced with Imperial ones. The transition felt cosmetic until it wasn't. Once a society accepts constant militarization, removing it becomes almost impossible. Darth Vader. Where Palpatine ruled through law and image, Darth Vader ruled through fear. He was not meant to be loved or understood. He was meant to be seen. His presence reminded everyone that the Empire no longer needed consent. You didn't argue with Vader. You complied or disappeared. The Empire no longer debated its enemies. It erased them. Centralization and control. Power flowed inward toward Coruscant. Local governments lost authority. Systems that resisted were punished economically or militarily. Those that complied were rewarded. The galaxy slowly learned a new rule. Loyalty mattered more than justice. The Empire did not need to occupy every planet with troops. It only needed to make examples, the illusion of safety. For a time, many citizens felt safe. If you weren't a Jedi, a rebel, or openly defiant, life continued. That illusion was the Empire's greatest shield. People convinced themselves that freedom was overrated if it meant constant war. Privacy seemed unnecessary if you had nothing to hide. Silence felt smarter than resistance. And that is how control becomes culture. The true rise of the Empire. The Galactic Empire did not rise because Palpatine was powerful. It rose because the galaxy was afraid, tired, and willing to trade liberty for certainty. No army marched on the Senate. No revolution overturned the Republic. The system collapsed inward, applauding as it did. That is why this story endures. Not because it is about lasers and starships, but because it understands something deeply human. The loudest tyranny is easy to spot. The quiet one arrives to applause. At first, the rise of the Galactic Empire feels dramatic and entertaining. The speeches are grand, the villains seem obvious. Then you notice how little resistance there was, how legal it all looked, how reasonable the excuses sounded. Suddenly it stops feeling like space fantasy and starts feeling like a warning. If you enjoy videos about how systems collapse from the inside, like and subscribe.